Previously, Tornak decided to fight fire with fire, or at least to fight persuasion with performance. On the way to the Wyvern's Claw, he started playing music and letting people know that he'd be performing there later that night. At the Wyvern's Claw, Taria tried to explain to Thalrizian how various things worked, which admittedly was a bit like the blind leading the blind. The half of the group there then investigated the job board, which led to Taria explaining to Thalrizian just how bad the past fortnight or so had been for Sean and Tornak especially. Eventually, the others arrived, and Tornak played a number of songs, including one he'd written called Magic for All. It was an immediate hit with the crowd. In the aftermath of his performance, a bard from the Arcane Title Board named Cassian came inside and tried his own brand of persuasion to convince everyone that the Cult of Thalakros was the better option. All his performance did was make people uncomfortable, though, and a number of them started to boo him. Tornak waved off the boos and made a speech that very quickly won over the crowd. Cassian stormed off, throwing a parting shot over his shoulder regarding the Praetors that Tornak threw back in his face when he revealed that the group knew the Praetors were mining dark tears. It was clear that Cassian hadn't realized they were quite that well informed, but now he knew. For better or for worse. More on that in a minute. Tornak was offered a contract by a well-known manager of multiple musicians. He told him he'd consider it at some point, but for the time being, all he asked was that Magic for All be shared with everyone. He wanted it to be a song of the people. While the crowd was keeping Tornak busy, Oz went over to Keelan to fill him in on the fact that he thought the crew of the Arcane Title Board were using magic to draw people in. When he mentioned that he wanted to go attend the meeting at the docks, Keelan pointed out that he tended to stand out somewhat, as did Keelan. The two of them would probably be the worst people of the group to try to do information gathering. They decided to sleep on it and see what the morning brought. Taria grabbed Oz to talk to him about a tattoo in memory of Zaya. Then she slipped off to head to the ship to talk with Vitalia. More on that in a minute as well. Thalrizian had a talk with Sean about her powers and where they came from, and he brought up the figures he'd seen standing behind her when she cast the resurrection spells recently. Sean explained that she was still figuring a lot of the details out herself. He then pointed out something on the job board that Taria had previously mentioned to him might be of interest to Sean, and she was very surprised to see a job posted related to the Brightwater family. Later, Oz and Sean had a talk. It was mostly about Zaya, but Oz offered to lend his ear if Sean ever needed it. Sean told him she'd keep that in mind, and then promptly kept things close to her chest, as she always did. Meanwhile, Taria arrived at the ship. Vitalia seemed surprised to see her, and she asked what she was doing there since Oz had just left. It took Taria a moment to realize that Oz couldn't have just left the ship since he was still back at the Wyvern's Claw, and she quickly asked what Vitalia was talking about. She told her that Oz had come by with some crates that he'd loaded onto the ship. Taria instinctively turned both her and Vitalia invisible. She told Vitalia to stay there and rushed off the ship to head back to the Wyvern's Claw. Before she got very far, though, she saw a number of guards rushing towards the ship. She wasn't fast enough to get back to the ship before them, so she disguised herself as Cassian and used Misty Step to immediately appear in the hold. She tried to make the guards think that she was him, and that he had been trying to plant the crates on the ship, but had been caught off guard by them arriving so soon. The guards mostly seemed confused. One of the guards opened a crate, and it was full of Praetor's supplies, as well as a letter or two from Alonzo sitting at the top that seemed to have been intercepted at some point. They quickly called for their leader, as that was above their pay grade. When the leader of the guards came into the ship's hold, it was Kai Gilbor, that is, Taria's father. She immediately dropped her disguise upon seeing him and called out Daddy. He was surprised, but pleased to see her. Taria quickly explained what she knew, and he went to work trying to deal with it. As they headed out of the ship with the crates, though, Kalroth used magic to intentionally make one of them fall apart to reveal the supplies inside. It was very clear that he was trying to harm the group's reputation in order to improve that of himself and his crew. Taria went back to the keep with her father, giving him a brief rundown of everything she'd been through recently on the way. As they left, she sent a message to a still invisible Vitalia to go to the Wyvern's Claw to fill the others in and have them meet her at the keep. Vitalia rushed to the Wyvern's Claw. Keelan and Thalrizian were both still in the main room, so she told them what had happened. They then went to get Sean, who was in her room but still awake, to see what she thought was the best plan. Upon hearing the news, she agreed that heading to the keep as quickly as possible was probably a good idea. Keelan and Vitalia went back to the ship to get Theron off of it so that they could put it in its bottle to prevent any more attempts at sabotage. Meanwhile, Thalrizian went to wake up Oz, while Sean went to wake up Tornak. They had very different reactions to the news. After a brief rundown of the situation, they all made their way back to the keep. Taria and her father were waiting for them outside, and they all were led to guest quarters inside once they arrived. Kai Gilmore explained that there was even more going on than they were aware of, and settled in to explain the current situation to them. And that is where we left off.